Now, the emergency energy plan announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier this week has been broadly welcomed, but Worldwide Fund for Nature, the WWF, says there are some potential flaws, such as the waiving of environmental considerations. In his address, the President announced measures to ensure that Eskom could speed up maintenance and repairs of its fleet, as well as measures to add more watts to the grid, given the gap that Eskom faces, which led to stage 6 rolling blackouts earlier. Ramaphosa said Eskom could expand power lines and substations without needing to get environmental authorization in areas of low and medium sensitivity and within the strategic electricity corridors. We're now joined by Khungeka Njobe, a Worldwide Fund's head of environmental program. Thank you for being with us. It sounds good on the surface of it, but especially because I think in this address there really was a strong focus on expediting renewable projects. But you're concerned about the flaws. Outline those for us.
So thank you very much for inviting me, Francis, and good evening to your listeners. We very much welcome the President's energy crisis plan, as many term it. And the reason for that is that we do see significant contribution by renewable technologies in actually addressing the energy constraints we're facing as a country. And this is something that we have been advocating for, that we need to scale up and roll out renewables more aggressively than we have been doing, and urgently so. We see more of that in the plan. But as you indicated in your introduction, there are some elements in the plan that we would like the President and all those who make these decisions to really think through them, particularly when it comes to detailed planning. The overall waiver of regulations, in our view, should not necessarily the waiver should not include environmental considerations. And the reason for that is that we have the view that when we don't pay attention to ensuring that our environment is protected and that we don't degrade it further, and we don't ensure that we protect the environment, this is a long-term effect. And that, in fact, the challenges that we're having on climate change, we may be vulnerable further because we need an environment that has integrity to ensure that we can buffer even with the extreme weather conditions that we are experiencing. So we would like to see some kind of a reconsideration of waiving environmental considerations when when the rollout takes place. And perhaps also government could also tap into the expertise that is vast in the country, in academia, in science councils, in NGOs, the institutions of government themselves, to actually come up with reasonable mechanisms that would still ensure that we identify the risks and that we put the right mitigation plans for environment. But we don't agree that we should just waive and continue to develop. We're already in a bad situation environmentally.
Sure, and he spoke a lot about cutting red tape and then streamlining the process, making things quicker. So it wasn't always clear if there will be any sort of shortcuts around environmental concerns, maybe just a faster process. But this is explicit. He said Eskom can expand power lines without needing to get environmental authorization in areas of low and medium sensitivity. That's a bit technical.
Yes.
How would you define low and medium sensitivity? And is it acceptable to say we can deal with those differently than to high sensitivity areas?
Yeah, so it's very difficult for a statement like that. Let me put it this way. We would object to a statement like that being made because I do think such a decision has to be made on a side-by-side basis, the decision to waiver or not to waiver. But there needs to be some level of risk assessment done. So even the so-called medium, low, low impact, sensitive, low sensitivity areas that are not as sensitive, as I understand his exclusion or for environmental requirements. Even those, we need to look at them very closely because we're dealing with complex systems here. Ecosystems are very complex, and we cannot say, oh, we can just develop in this area and because maybe there's not so much loss. You can't predetermine that. You need to determine that at least through some risk assessment process. And I'm saying that perhaps there are ways to do that in a way that is speedy and actually aligns to the edge and to the urgent delivery that this is implied by this plan.
Ms. Njobe, what would you say to people who say we have an emergency situation here? Electricity is crucial. If the economy collapses, it's simple. More people are going to die from hunger in this country. There's going to be more violence. Will you accept some curtailing of what's in place if it's not all necessary? Has anybody looked at what is actually necessary? Are we going beyond that as South Africa?
What I like about the president's plan, by the way, is that it was not just one set of interventions. There's a diversity of interventions there, including basically sourcing from the surplus energy that's available from existing renewable energy providers and speeding up the implementation of the rounds that have already gone through the processes, and also now opening up the embedded generation, which is actually can benefit us greatly, particularly for households. So what we're saying is that perhaps where there's going to be direct impact on the environment, we can also be a little bit more circumspect and perhaps look at options for energy rollout. Or solution or a new energy generation rollout, where the impact is not as evident. So, or rather, would not be is already determined, or at least we know it's not there. So, what we are advocating is that can we also take time as part of the detailed planning to look at different packages of rolling out this plan. And there will be parts of the packages of rolling out this plan where actually we need to look at environmental considerations in a sort of deeper way because we don't want to create impacts for the long term.
Sure, like you say, we already are facing impacts. Thank you very much. That was Khungeka Njobe, Worldwide Fund's Head of Environmental Program.